Hello everyone, I'm Kevin and I'll be your host for today's Global Investor Relations Q&A live stream. So thank you all for joining us for today's live stream. I have special guest Mark Connolly with me today. He is the Vice President of our Investor Relations team here at Faraday Future, and we are here in Los Angeles at our headquarters. So today we're going to be going through a couple of questions gathered from users all over the world. That's China, the US, even parts of Europe. So we're very excited to get on our way, but first I'd like to have Mark introduce himself. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Kevin. I'm Mark Connolly, and I spent 25 years on Wall Street as a securities analyst before joining Faraday just a few months ago. I worked for companies like JP Morgan, Credit Suisse, and CLSA. Spent a lot of time in China, looking largely at the way industries evolve and disruption, and how supply chains work. It's exciting to be here. After 25 years, I wanted to do something a little bit different, but I didn't want to lose touch with investors, which is the best part of what I've been doing for the last 25 years. Is helping investors understand, helping investors work through the issues they have with companies, and so far it's been great.
Yeah, and talking to you before having this live stream, I've learned so much just about the stock exchange, about public companies and things like that, and it's really exciting to have you on here. As you all know, Faraday Future tries its best to hire the top talents from all of the industries and different fields. And Mark here is no different. Thank you very much for joining us today and for being a part of Faraday Future.
Communicating with investors is so important, and we're going to ramp that up quite a bit over the next several months. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, and I wanted to give people a little bit of time to get settled in before we started our Q&A session in earnest. But I imagine we're short on time as is, so we will have to get started. Let's change lanes and get started with these questions.
Super.
I have it down in sections, but I'll jump around when it seems like it makes sense. Starting with FFIE, Nasdaq, Special Committee, and Internal Investigation questions. So starting with the toughest questions
Imagine
first.
You got quite a few of those questions.
Absolutely. So we grouped up some of these questions by the most popular ones. The first one, when will the financial report be submitted?
Okay, so start with a really tough question. The delay in our 10Q filing, which is a significant and disappointing event for us, is caused by a review being done by a special committee of the board of directors. The filing will be made when that review is done. Now, the special committee does not tell you what they're investigating or when they're going to be finished. That's because they need to be independent and they don't need to be under pressure. Remember, they exist to protect the shareholders. Right. So the board is fully behind that committee investigation, as you imagine, and the management team is working really hard to help the committee get that done as quickly as they can. Now, when that investigation is finished, the next step will be to deliver the findings and recommendations, whatever they are, to our auditors. And then at that point, we should be able to file our 10Q and get back on track.
All right. So I guess the follow-up question to that would be when the investigation results would be released. Is there an estimate?
There really is no estimate, but certainly the special committee is working as fast as they can. Certainly, this delay was unexpected, and obviously it's hurt our stock. Right. Yeah. When you disappoint investors, you pay a price for it, and we are paying a price for it, and we're doing everything we can to get back on track and rebuild that trust. But again, there's no specific timeline for the investigation. It needs to be thorough. It needs to be done right, because the entire purpose of this investigation is to make sure that we are doing business up to our own high standards. Yeah. We want to be ethical, we want to be transparent, we want to be doing business the right way, and that's what this investigation is about. When it's done, we should be able to put a whole bunch of issues and questions behind us, and hopefully for good.
All right, that's really good to know, because just the special committee is ultimately an internal investigation. And there is no external involvement in terms of the SEC or any of official like that.
The investigation was a decision made by our own board of directors to look into issues that have come up in a short seller report, and some of those issues had come up previously. So there are maybe other things that they're looking at. But yeah, I mean, this was a decision that our company's board made to protect the shareholders of our company, and it's got the full support. I was with Carsten, our CEO, a couple of days ago, and as he said to investors then, he said, "I am on that board, and I am 100% supporting this committee's work." And he's got the entire organization working to help the committee get this done as fast as they can.
Well, hopefully it is. And let's go with the next question here. Regarding the short report that you mentioned, why did it take so long for Faraday Future to start the investigation? And will it affect our company's operations down the line, having the multiple lawsuits?
So I don't think that the special committee or the company has actually ever disclosed when the special committee investigation began. So I can't really address the question of whether there was or wasn't a delay, or which came first. So that's an assumption I think that people might be making that may not be correct. As far as lawsuits, there's, anytime a company disappoints, there's always the possibility of lawsuits, but we're not aware of any significant lawsuits at this point related to this delay. Remember, the board decided to do this because they believed it was in the best interest of the shareholders, and management is fully supportive of that investigation. We're doing everything we can to get back on track with our filings.
Okay. All right, so another user has asked regarding the Nasdaq letter, right? So the Nasdaq letter, does that mean that FF is going to be delisted from the stock exchange?
I'm really glad that question came up, because there's been a lot of posts on social media, and even journalists have been writing things that sort of suggest they don't really understand how public companies work. Okay, so when you become a public company and you list on a stock exchange, one of the requirements is to file a 10Q 3 times a year and a 10K once a year. So there's 4 times a year when you're going to file your financial data. When you don't file on time, and that's what happened to us, the special committee report delayed our filing of our 10Q. When you don't file on time, you are delinquent.
Yes.
So that triggered Nasdaq to say, hey, you're in our delinquent process now, and so now we have to follow the Nasdaq process. And here's the steps in the process, at least I'll go through some of them. The first thing you have to do is, within 4 days of receiving the notification from Nasdaq, and that notification to Nasdaq actually came to me, you have 4 days to issue a press release saying, hey, we are delinquent. Now, that didn't tell investors anything they didn't already know, because the delinquency was the delay in our filing, which we told investors about on November 15th.
Yes.
So the actual Nasdaq press release that we put out was more of a formality required in that process. Now, the next step in the process is that we have 30 days to present to Nasdaq our plan for how we're going to remedy the delay.
Right.
And that's the process we're in right now. Then there's steps beyond that. Just to skip all the nitty-gritty detail, as long as we follow the Nasdaq process and get ourselves back into normal listing timing, normal filing timing, it goes away. And so there isn't really anything different here. And again, the Nasdaq process, just like the SEC process, is designed to protect shareholders. So we're following those steps, and as long as we follow those steps, there's no material threat that we're going to be delisted. That's a misunderstanding, I think, of investors who are simply not understanding the steps in the process. And as I said, we've even seen that in the print media, which is surprising, because you can just go to any of the websites and look at the regulations. We're simply in a normal administrative process right now.
Okay, well, that is good to know. And I guess you mentioned some things about leadership, the shareholders, the board. So at the level of corporate governance, is there someone who can dominate most of the business decisions? Who is this person?
That's an interesting question, because obviously most people would assume that the CEO has tons of power. And obviously on a daily basis, they are the chief executive officer.
Right.
Their job is to deliver on the plan. And then of course, at the top of the company, you have a CEO and a CFO on the financial side. We also have a leadership team underneath that, which includes our founder, who also reports to our board. But that's the key part, is who really runs a company? The board runs the company.
Right.
The board hires a management team, and they fire them too, as we've seen at many other companies. The board determines what that management team is going to do. The management team presents a plan and says, this is what we want to do, and the board says yes or no. And then the board follows and says, okay, are they doing what we agreed they were going to do? So if there is anybody sort of running a company, it's the board.
Okay.
And that's why it's important to have an independent board, and not all companies do. We have 9 directors, 6 of which are independent.
Right.
And that's really important. And of course the special committee is put together of completely independent directors. So 3 of our independent directors are the basis of the special committee.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot of knowledge about just how a public company works, and ultimately these board members, like you mentioned before, have the shareholders' interest in mind.
Right. I mean, the role of a board, and the reason public companies are required to have a board, is first and foremost to protect the interests of the shareholders, and secondly, to make sure that management is executing on the plan, and if they're not, to make changes in management.
Okay. Yes. Right, so a couple of questions regarding FFIE in China. So the first one is regarding Geely. Geely has taken back 50 million. I'm going to assume that's US dollars. Is the cooperation between FF and Geely ruined? Is there a cooperation? Why has there been no progress?
Okay, there's a couple of missing pieces in this question, so I'm glad it came up. Geely didn't take back $50 million. Geely is actually an investor in FF. They're a stockholder in our company, and we're very happy to have them as a stockholder. Separately, we have formed a technical agreement with them. Okay. Geely has access to some very attractive EV platform technology, and we have signed a contract with them to use their platform as a potential basis for future vehicles that we would produce for China. Now, the attractiveness of that is, you hear about our skateboard and our platform technology. You hear all EV companies love to talk about their platform. I'd like to talk about ours because the VPA, the variable platform architecture, is really attractive. But you need different platforms for different cars sometimes, and they have a very attractive platform for some vehicles that we are looking to produce in China. Not the FF91, but later on. Right. And so we formed an agreement with them, and it's going very well. So we actually have 2 relationships. One as a shareholder, and we're happy to have them, and second as a technology partner, and so far that's going very well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you mentioned something about the VPA, so let's just skip down to a question regarding that. One of our users has asked, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the company, so FF's VPA platform, compared with someone like Rivian's skateboard platform in terms of modularity or general flexibility of parts?
Okay, so it's difficult for me to talk about other companies, and they will be happy to share with investors the advantages they see in their platforms. But our variable platform architecture is super interesting, and it was designed from the beginning to be multi-use. So the variable platform architecture in our skateboard for the FF91 is designed with 3 motors, 2 in the back, 1 in the front. It's for the FF91, we're going to have 0 to 60 in less than 2.4 seconds. We're going to have 370 mile range. We've got two motors in the back, so we have variable torque, rear wheel torque vectoring. We've got rear wheel steering. That's an amazing amount of stuff for one platform to do. But what really makes the platform interesting is that same platform can be configured with 1 motor in the front or the back, 2 in the back, 1 in the front, 1 in the back, or 3 as the FF91 will have. Okay. So the FF81 will use exactly the same platform with a different motor configuration and potentially a different battery configuration without material changes to the platform itself. And that's what's so attractive. You know, if you look at some of the other EV companies, it may have taken them several years to move from their first vehicle to their second.
Yeah.
We're going to be producing our second vehicle 18 months after we launch our first vehicle, and that's because this VPA has so many advantages. And that was part of Waitija's vision from the start.
Right.
The idea was, don't reinvent technology you don't need to use. Get it right the first time and make it reusable.
Right.
And so that's why we're so excited about our platform. It's an ultra high performance platform, but it's also super versatile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really important because, you know, in the future when we need to scale up and start taking on mass producing the 8.1, the 7.1, we want to be able to cut down on R&D costs and just be able to get the car out to the people as soon as possible, right?
You know, some of the early EV companies took multiple years to move from their first vehicle to their second.
Right, yeah.
We're going to move quickly because of that variable platform architecture, and the Geely technology will allow us to move into other vehicles in China at some point faster than we would otherwise be able to do, and less expensively, which is important. One of the significant things to keep in mind about the FF81 is that it shares 60% of its components with the 9.1. So when you talk about cutting down on development costs, a lot of the development costs that are going into the 9.1, which is a relatively low production vehicle, are actually going to go straight into the 8.1 without having to be reworked.
Yeah. So you also mentioned this number of 18 months after the FF91 is released. I have a question here from a user that says, or it's a statement followed by a question. It says, the company's stock price has recently plummeted, which has hindered financing and business development, which has led to the delay of the 8.1 and 7.1 mass production. In today's increasingly competitive new EV industry, how can the company ensure that the 8.1 and 7.1 will remain competitive in a few years? So,
well, there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, so I suppose breaking it down, it's the company's stock price and how that is going to hinder our business development.
Right.
And has this truly led to a delay in the
so let's start with that. We are obviously extremely frustrated with our share price. Look, when a public company disappoints its shareholders, this is what happens.
Right, yeah.
And unfortunately, the delay in this filing, which disappointed all of us, is something that makes people wonder, is everything okay? The good news is, as Karsten, our CEO, said just a week ago during the business update, this has not materially impacted our business plan. We are on schedule to deliver the FF91 just as we said we would in July of 2022. The FF81 program has not been materially affected. Now, we have to raise additional capital to fund that program, which has always been the plan.
Yeah.
And this delay in our filing could impact the timing of that. If we were to try to raise the money today, for example, we can't because our filings are delayed. But we're not under pressure at this point to raise that capital.
Right.
So there hasn't actually been any material impact on the program from this delay, and hopefully the delay will be over soon and we're back on track before it does have any impact.
Yeah, so regarding the stock price of the company, a user has asked, now that the stock price is at a low level, does the management team plan to increase their holdings?
Yeah, well, the stock is certainly at what we consider to be a very low level. The rules for public company managements to buy and sell stock are extremely strict. And I can tell you at these levels, there's a lot of people inside the company, management and otherwise, who would like to be buying stock right now. But there are windows when management can and can't buy shares. And when your filings are delayed like they are now, the window is absolutely closed.
Yeah.
So those windows are designed to protect investors, because obviously during a period like this, there may be things that management knows about the company that we have not been able to publicly disclose, because normally we would disclose that with our 10Q.
Right.
So during those periods when we have information and I have information about the company that the public doesn't have, the window is closed. So right now management cannot buy and cannot sell. And I've seen social media listings that say, oh my gosh, they're probably taking advantage of this when we can't. Well, that simply reflects a lack of understanding about how public companies work. The windows are very strict. They usually open shortly after we release our earnings and deliver all that information. And then they close again sort of as that information accumulates again inside the company. So there is no ability to buy or sell stock for management right now until this window reopens. And as I've said a bunch of times, everybody wants this window open again.
Yeah.
And certainly with the stock where it is now, there's a lot of people who want that window to open so they can buy it.
Yeah. I definitely felt this way when I took a look. I was like, man, I can't buy anything. And it's always great to talk with you because just learn so much. Hopefully, a couple of these other questions will actually teach me some things as well. So moving on to some of the production questions here. Faraday Future said in the pipe deck that the FF91 Futurists will be delivered next year in Q1. So that's Q1 of 2022. How do you deliver it? The factory hasn't been built yet.
Okay, so what the pipe deck actually said was that the car would be delivered 12 months after the money was raised. And the pipe deck, the pipe deck was written, but it was several months later that we actually raised the money.
Okay.
The money was raised in July of 2021, and so first production is expected July of 2022, 12 months after we raised the money.
And we're on track.
And we are on track, as Karsten said last week. We've already hit 3 of the 7 milestones we laid out, and we're working on the 4th, which is pre-production builds. So we're right on track to deliver in July of 2022, just as the pipe deck said. But I do understand the confusion because the pipe deck was released, but then the money wasn't raised until 4 months later.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right, and you mentioned the 4th milestone. So that's the pre-production vehicle being built, and we saw during our time in Hanford that it is well on its way. So regarding the status of the Hanford factory. One of our users has asked that, does FF91 require advanced technology and the ability to customize vehicles determine the rate of automation at Hanford factory? So I suppose they're asking regarding the pre-production area as it is not fully automated. Would you care to elaborate on the production?
Yeah, I think I understand what they're asking. The FF91 is not going to be a high volume production car. Right. It's a high-end tech luxury vehicle, and the market's never seen one of those yet. We're going to be the first. In the pre-production area, as we saw last week, the first build, which is going on right now, is actually very slow. When you and I were there, we saw them install the battery pack, and a little while later we saw them uninstall the battery pack. And what they're doing is they're looking to figure out exactly the right way to put the components together and the right way to maneuver in place for safety, for efficiency. That first build will actually take several weeks. Sure. Now then after that, the second build will actually take less time, but it won't be happening overnight either. It's going to take several weeks as well. Those first builds are to optimize lots of different things. You're trying to optimize the way you put this. Should we build this component and then install the component, or should we keep this one piece off because it'll be easier to put on and then put it in place later? So you have manufacturing steps like that. But then you also are trying to validate the technology. As we saw late in the day when we were up there, after they had a couple of components in place, the assembly people moved away and people moved in with laptops to test what was going on, right? So that's why it's so long. It's not just an assembly process, it's assembly, testing, validation, take it apart again, assemble, test, validate again a different way to make sure that every component is behaving the way you want it to and that you're putting it together the right way. Now, once you get past those first couple of builds and you start to settle in on how the process is going to work, you're sure that the parts are working and performing as they're supposed to, then the process starts to speed up. But pre-production is not about volume. Pre-production is about getting everything right and making sure things are behaving properly. And then you take those first pre-production cars and you get out on the road with them and you test their performance and you test their safety and you test and test and test. So you shouldn't think about speed and efficiency in pre-production. You think about getting it right. Now then, the other side of the plant, which as you and I saw, was largely empty in terms of people, because you don't need a lot of people to watch cement cure. And that's what's happening in that side of the plant right now. When that part of the plant is ready to go, we will gradually bring in the people and you'll watch production ramp up. But again, the production doesn't ramp up linearly like that. Production starts out slow as you get people used to the equipment and optimize. And then you sort of ramp up and you hit a plateau. And you plateau on purpose because you want to re-optimize and make sure that everything is right again there. And then you ramp up again.
Okay.
So it's actually quite a process to ramp assembly. And this is true of any new automotive build.
Yeah, so you mentioned this idea of ramping and then plateauing to reassess and then ramping again. Part of our strategy really includes China and the market there. So I have a user who's asked, what's the current progress of China localization and mass production in China?
So it's a great question, because even before I answer it, the most important thing to remember about our business plan is that China is the world's largest EV market. It's also the world's largest luxury car market. So if there is any most natural place for Faraday Future to be as the first and hopefully best tech luxury vehicle to hit the market, China is it.
Yeah.
Fundamental to our business strategy is what we call the dual home market. And it's a dual home market advantage because we have deep roots in China and we have deep roots here in the US. So the first FF91s will be built here, but at some point in the future, FF91s will be built in China, and the same will go for our other vehicles. And of course, I mentioned the Geely relationship, so that's other vehicles that we haven't really even spent a lot of time talking about yet. So it's absolutely critical to our business plan to have production in both regions, and it just makes all the sense in the world,
right.
Because we have so much expertise working there and so much expertise working here, I think more than any other EV company probably.
Yeah, and regarding the progress in China, there's another question around Evergrande. So is FF considering Evergrande OEM production? Either the FF71 or other models that can be developed together with Evergrande?
We have not discussed publicly too much about our specific partners, but you can certainly, other than the Geely relationship, obviously, but you can assume that we are talking to a number of potential partners there, because there's a lot of good technology and good manufacturing capacity and good potential partners for us. So as we have more to say about that and as we get closer to production there, we will be saying a whole lot more. But you can imagine that we're talking to all of the major EV companies over there, because we have a unique product and we're going to have a unique place in the China market.
Yeah. Of course, and not talking too much about partners, but regarding suppliers, we've been well on our way to secure those. And there's a question here that's asking, what proportion of all the parts and components of the FF91 mass-produced car belong to the Hanford factory?
It's sort of a hard question to answer. Hanford is principally a manufacturing facility, an assembly facility. So there will be some parts and component assembly there, but most of the parts will be coming in like they are at any company from other suppliers, many of which are from China, and of course we're building a relationship in South Korea. So you should really think about Hanford as the place where all the parts end up for manufacturing, although there is probably a little bit of, depending on how you think about it, parts will come in and pre-assembly certainly happens there.
Yeah, and the in regards to the supply chain right now, how is the overall cash flow, and can it support the mass production of the FF91?
So as Karsten mentioned, and since we can't put our full financials out, we were allowed to say that we had $667 million as of September 30th, which was more than sufficient to launch the FF91.
Okay.
So no one is worried about getting that car out on plan. Well, of course we are. We're worried about everything, especially in a supply chain environment like we're in now.
Right.
But we have sufficient cash to launch the car in July as we plan.
Okay, so July 2022 is the official launch of the FF91, and what is the date looking like for the FF91 launch in China, and will there be issues regarding safety and compliance when that happens?
Sure, that's an important question because many, if not probably more than half of the initial orders for the limited edition came from China, which makes sense because it's the world's biggest luxury market, right? So the way the process will work is this. Start of production is July 2022. Okay. Those cars will go through their final safety testing here in the U.S. It's the crash testing and all that, of course, it will be done long before that. But you have some last couple of regulatory steps, and then the cars are released to the public. China first delivery will be 3 or 4 months later. And during that window, we will go through China's regulatory process, which is really not that dissimilar from the U.S. regulatory. You know, we have all the safety testing we have to do here. In China, they have a similar rigorous safety testing program. We have about 4 certifications, I think, that we have to get over in China, and they relate to road tests and safety tests, just like in the U.S. All of that is expected to be finished in time for delivery, which again, first China delivery is a couple months after the first U.S. delivery.
All right, so then for the question regarding the FF flagship store in China, when is that planned?
You know, I don't think we have said publicly when the first China flagship will be in place, but as you can imagine, since we're planning to sell and deliver our first cars in China in 2022, you can sort of imagine that somewhere around that time we ought to have our flagship in place. But we haven't given any specifics yet. We have recently announced that our first flagship store here in the United States will be in Beverly Hills. So exciting. Stay tuned on the China side.
Yeah, and I imagine the flagship in China is going to be just spectacular as well.
Faraday Future's pretty good at spectacular.
Yeah.
If you sat in the car, we're pretty good at spectacular.
Absolutely. So a lot of users are also interested in not only the FF91, but also the 81 and 71, right? So you mentioned that we're still on track for the 81 and 71 production. But a follow-up question to that would be, when will the prototype and pre-sale of the FF81 be available?
You know, we haven't set that timetable yet. You know, once the FF91 is out there, obviously there's going to be a whole lot more people aware of our cars and looking maybe for a slightly lower price point. I know I'm looking for a slightly lower price point. So the plan is to launch the FF91 in July of 2022, and the 81 will come later in 2023.
Right.
So at some point in that window, we're going to open up pre-orders for the 81.
Makes sense.
But it's a little too soon now because virtually all of the company's attention right now is on launching that 91 on time in an incredibly difficult environment.
Yeah.
Right? Between COVID and supply chain challenges and inflation, we've got enough on our plate right now.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, you'll hear more from us in terms of that timing probably early next year.
And it does make a lot of sense what you mentioned earlier. Just getting FF91s in the hands of real-world drivers is really going to do just a lot for the FF81, because people are going to be like, wow, that's a car, that's a company that I want to be a part of. And I imagine the FF81 pre-sales will begin sometime around then.
Yeah,
it's very exciting.
You know, it's important to understand the FF91 is a completely different kind of vehicle than what consumers are used to. And even when I was interviewing to come work here, I understood that it was different, but I didn't understand how different, because you don't really understand how different this car is until you sit in it. When you sit in an EV car in the driver's seat, you have a lot of power, you have a lot of technology. When you sit in the passenger seat, you take out your iPhone and play with your iPhone.
Right. Yeah.
In our car, you have so much technology at your fingertips in the passenger seat. You have a large screen monitor in the front seat with all of your apps already loaded, all of your preferences already set. If you're in the back, if you're lucky enough to be in the back seat with those 60-degree reclined seats that are as nice as anything in first class on an airline, and a 27-inch television, you're in a different world, and you're probably going to leave your phone in your pocket.
Well, I'm trying to get off the screen as much as I can, so an FF91 backseat would be a dream for me. Yeah. So when the car is off the line in July 2022, how long will it take to develop, download, install any of the assisted driving functions?
So basic assisted driving, like self-parking and all of that, is already coming. I think probably what the question is really about is FSD, full self-driving. Right. And the technology for full self-driving will be in the FF91 when it's delivered. But as we've seen from other companies' experiments and exploits with full self-driving, the world's not ready for it. No. And the technology is not there, and the regulatory environment is being very cautious, as they should be.
Of course.
So when the world is ready for full self-driving, the FF91 will already be there. We have the technology built into the car, and it will simply be a software download. Yeah. And the user will be ready to relax. Yeah. And sit back.
I think that's the most important thing, is to have the hardware available and ready to accept any sort of software updates. And then you're just able to enjoy full self-driving when it is actually realized. We don't want to make any promises, and kind of getting back to the transparency thing, we want to be as transparent as possible. So we don't want to advertise anything that we're not able to deliver, like other companies in the field. And things like that.
I think what people don't fully appreciate, and they won't appreciate it until they see the first car, is that our founder YT had a vision of intelligent mobility that went far beyond what you've seen in the market so far. You have car companies producing very good, technically good mechanical EV cars, but and then talking about full self-driving, but not thinking about what happens next. Yeah. When you have full self-driving, the vision that YT Jha had for our company is, we're going to build a car for that time, not for now and then have to add stuff later. We're building the car for the future, and Faraday Future is going to be is going to redefine market expectations. Yeah. And of course, not everyone will be able to afford a 9.1, but then the F1 comes and brings it to a more affordable price point, and the 7.1 brings it to an even more affordable price point.
Yeah, and right, so we're gonna wrap up. We're already over time, but I'll ask two more questions, sure, if you have the time. So when will the cars be available for test rides and test drives?
Okay, so I got my first ride a couple months ago, so on a very limited basis, the cars have been available. Mm-hmm. We did a demonstration in New York City several months ago, right, that was very well received, and we've done some since then. We have the availability to bring some people here to our headquarters, yeah, and give them a ride. But I think what the question is probably getting to is, when are we going to be able to really share this broadly? Yeah, yeah. And the way to think about it is, right now the pre-production cars that we're building are being used for safety testing, validation, to make sure that everything is right. As you start to accumulate a few more cars, then you start to have flexibility to bring those cars on the road. Mm-hmm. And that should be coming up over the next couple of months. Yeah. And so you're going to be seeing a lot more of the FF91 over the next couple of months.
Yeah, so I think this kind of came out from the LA Auto Show, and a lot of people saw the experience that people had getting those test rides there. So I actually have a user excited for the auto show in China. So will FF participate, or have they planned for participation at one of the auto shows in China?
So we haven't announced anything specific about our auto show participation, but I'll just say what I said before. China is the world's largest EV market, and it is the world's largest luxury car market, and we are going to be the first tech luxury EV in the China market. So you can imagine that we're going to have a good participation at future shows, but we don't have anything to announce just yet.
Okay.
But you know, look, stay up on this app, and you'll see those announcements here.
Yeah. And I know I threw a bunch of questions from various departments at you, but thank you for taking them on. And with that, we're going to have to wrap up. We tried our best to get through as many questions as we can, but as always, our users have more for us. So please continue to interact with me, continue to interact with the FF Investor Relations team, and continue to interact with Mark Connolly to receive more answers, to receive more updates, and always the latest news is available on our app. So thank you so much again, Mark. And I really look forward to having you on again after we get some business updates.
Sure, and in the interim, I do plan to be busy on the app. So if there's questions and people want to talk to me, you can find me at FF Investor Relations on the app, at Mark Connolly. So please, encourage all of your users to contact me there.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to getting Mark on in the future. If this was agreeable for you, did it feel all right?
This is what it's all about.
Okay.
Right. My job is to communicate the most exciting story in EV to investors, and this is a great way to do it. So thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to have more of these Q&A sessions in the future, as I believe you have questions for our other departments. So please let me know what other departments you would like to hear from regarding production, regarding design. Anything is possible, and I'll try my best to make it happen and get that Q&A session for you. And this is going to be the end of the live stream for today. Thank you very much for joining me and Mark Connolly, and have a good night.